Greetings, friends of liberty. Imagine, if you would, a very imaginative group of men. They believe that a being exists so tall that his height stretches from Land's End to John O'Groats, not an inch less than 874 miles. And these men call this being Grawe. Now they, without knowing a tittle of whether Grawe be good or bad, merry or sad, grim or glad by nature, nonetheless start to worship him. But why? Perhaps they fear him, and his anger. 'Tis a mystery. In any case, spreading this outlandish notion that Grawe exists, and making buildings called churches to indoctrinate the people Sunday after Sunday, so that they don't forget this fable, they soon convince foolish English kings of Grawe's existence as well, and gain power over all English society, claiming that Grawe will be angry if some Englishman sins, as if Grawe cared, or, if he did, it were his business. So, for example, imagine that a poor farmer would kill one of the king's deer to feed his starving family. The Graweans would claim this a sin, saying that the poor farmer would go to a type of hell called Purgatory if he didn't do penance, which might involve years of fasting every third day to remove the alleged guilt of his alleged sin for killing the deer. Now, being clever and hypocritical and understanding human nature, this group of men soon prepared an alternative to either fasting for years on end or spending years in the torture of purgatory. They, not surprisingly, discovered a monetary solution. They would tell the farmer that if he would pay their church an amount of money, Grawe would conveniently forgive the farmer's sin. This they called an indulgence. In other words, Grawe would be so indulgent after having received payment, he would forget all about the alleged crime. Truly a clever scheme, if you were to ask me. As a result, this group of men raked in mountains of gold, hundreds of feet high, a monstrous yet profitable deception. So let us review their scheme again. First, they convinced we English that Grawe existed. Then, that he was angry at the farmer and many others besides. And then they demanded payments galore to remove the imagined punishment. Diabolical and profitable. Now, if we turn to schemes, payments for the forgiveness of sins, either imaginary or real, in your own 20th and 21st centuries in the West, we find today, not surprisingly, the delightful polemical expose of Christopher Hitchens and his The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and Practice. Yes, Mother Teresa, that same alleged savior of the worm-eaten beggars who allegedly, according to her publicist Malcolm Muggeridge, overflowed the streets and gutters of Calcutta. This book followed Hitchens' 1994 documentary on Mother Teresa called Hell's Angel. He begins by discussing what prompted his own boldness in attacking one of the most revered public figures of the entire 20th century. He says, "Who would be so base as to pick on a wizened, shriveled old lady, well stricken in years, who has consecrated her entire life to the needy and the destitute? Indeed, who would?" The vast majority of authors have written a flood of books like Mother Teresa Helping the Poor, Mother Teresa The Glorious Years, Mother Teresa Woman in Love, Mother Teresa Protector of the Sick, Mother Teresa Servant to the World's Suffering People, and most famous of all, Malcolm Muggeridge's Something Beautiful for God. But despite, or even because, of this avalanche of hagiographical print, should she not sometimes merit a closer examination? than has been given to her by virtually every media personage and public figure from corrupt Washington, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry to Bill and Hillary Clinton? So, for example, do you think Miss Clinton was aware that before she visited Mother T's orphanage in Delhi, the caretakers there had quickly removed the unhygienic thin cotton diapers the infants usually wore, replacing them with fresh, new, clean American Pampers and newly stitched floral pinafores? I doubt it. And did you know that Mother T didn't even bother buy washing machines for her clinics, which would have poured into her clinics for free if she just asked for them? He first brings our attention to a photograph of Mother T embracing with a loving glance the wife of one of the most brutal dictators of modern Caribbean history, Haiti's Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier, the result of whose regime of terror was that thousands of Haitians were tortured and killed, and hundreds of thousands fled the country during his presidency. Would Mother T have embraced Eva Braun instead, too, to get the German Legion of Honor, as she did the Haitian from Miss Duvalier? And would she have said to Eva Braun, as she did to Miss Duvalier, that she had never seen the poor people being so familiar with their head of state as they were with her? It was a beautiful lesson for me. Do you not think that Papa Doc, amid his torturing and murdering, played back this exact footage of Mother Teresa embracing his wife on state TV again and again and again? And when we look to the unfortunates who come to our hostels, what kind of actual medical treatment do they receive? A highly regarded Dr. Fox, who visited her clinic in 1994, noted, "I was disturbed to learn that the formulary includes no strong analgesics. Along with the neglect of diagnosis, the lack of good analgesia marks Mother Teresa's approach as clearly separate from the hospice movement. If you were suffering or dying, wouldn't you want a strong painkiller? And is her goal not to alleviate suffering? No, as she said, I think it is very beautiful for the poor to accept their lot, to share it with the passion of Christ. I think the world is being much helped by the suffering of the poor people." Dr. Fox continues, "Could not someone have looked at a blood test? Investigations, I was told, are seldom permissible. How about simple algorithms that might help the sisters and volunteers distinguish the curable from the incurable? Again, no, such systemic approaches are alien to the ethos of the home." So Mother Teresa claimed she was pro-life, but refused to distinguish the curable whose lives could be saved from the incurable. There are many documented cases of her neglect. A boy with a broken leg not set, a man with a huge hydrocele not drained, and thousands who could profit from antibiotics. Sadly, there are many other similar reports. We see, for example, that of Nurse Mary Loudon, who had this testimony to offer about Mother T's home for the dying. My initial impression was that all of the photographs and footage I've seen of Belsen, the concentration camp, and places like that. No chairs anywhere, just stretcher beds, no garden, no yard even, no nothing. And I thought, what is this? They're dying. They're not being given a great deal of medical care. They're not being given painkillers really beyond aspirin for the sort of pain that goes with terminal cancer. Nurse Loudon described the case of a 15-year-old boy who could have been cured with simple antibiotics, who now needed an operation, but the clinic refusing to even pay for a cab to take him to a hospital. They don't do it. They won't do it. If they do it for one, they have to do it for everybody. And I thought, but this kid is 15. Remember what this canonized saint of the Catholic Church just said? It is very beautiful for the poor to accept their lot. Here's another example. Mother T described a person who was in the last agonies of cancer and suffering unbearable pain. With a smile, Mother Teresa told the camera what she told this terminal patient. You are suffering like Christ on the cross, so Jesus must be kissing you. The patient replied, then please tell him to stop kissing me. In many cases, needles are reused again and again without being sterilized, undoubtedly in some cases passing hepatitis B and HIV on to unsuspecting patients. And are the dying patients even allowed to watch TV? No. And children in their orphanages to play with toys? No. The many donated toys are either sold or taken by relatives of the nuns. Even singing is not allowed. One of the reasons that Mother T had for keeping the appearance and treatment of the clinics in such bad shape was so that she could garner more sympathy and donations, and thus more money. As one former nurse, a Miss Susan Shields, described, the sisters were forced to plead poverty, thus manipulating generous, credulous people and enterprises into giving more goods, services, and cash. Our bank account was already the size of a great fortune and increased with every postal service delivery. Around 50 million had collected in one checking account in the Bronx. Those of us who worked in the office regularly understood that we were not to speak about our work. If we turn now away from the treatment of the unfortunates brought to her clinics to the question of what a donation to the Sisters of Charity really could buy, just like indulgences, we find Hitchens giving us the following example of Charles Keating, one of the great swindlers in American history, who took over $253 million from investors, but who also gave $1 million+ donation to Mother T. When Keating was indicted in front of Judge Lance Ito of O.J. Simpson fame in California, his donation bought him a letter from Mother Teresa to the judge himself, in which she said that, I only know that he has always been kind and generous to God's poor, and always ready to help whenever there was a need. It is for this reason that I do not want to forget him now, while he and his family are suffering. And when the deputy district attorney asked her to return the stolen money she had received from him, Mother Teresa never even replied to the district attorney's letter. Was that the action of a saint? Let's move to other related actions or beliefs of Mother T. On the subject of her Catholic dogma against contraception and abortion, Hitchens rightly says, in every developing country that has been studied, a clear correlation can be found between the limitation of family size and the life chances of the family members. But what did Mother T say on the subject? Abortion is the direct killing of a child by its own mother. If a mother can kill her own child, what will prevent us from killing ourselves or one another? Nothing. And in Ireland, she said, let us promise Our Lady, who loves Ireland so much, that we will never allow in this country a single abortion and no contraceptives. Now, given that with no contraception and abortion, there would be much more infanticide and much more suffering of millions of children whom their parents can't support, it would be utterly logical if Mother Teresa were against suffering to be for contraception and abortion. But as we've seen, she's not against suffering and has no problem with parents bringing millions of infants into the world who will lead impoverished or miserable lives. B, on Galileo and the silencing by the Catholic Church of one of the greatest scientists the world has ever seen, she told an interviewer that if faced with a choice between Galileo and the Inquisition, she would have sided with the church authorities. Of course. C, Hitchens gives a valiant effort to recount of the many awards and prizes she has won. Here are just a few. The Templeton Prize for the promotion of faith in the world, the Albert Schweitzer Prize, a United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization Medal, the Prize of the Miraculous Lotus from the Indian government, the John the 23rd Prize for Peace, in Boston the Good Samaritan Award, the International Baltzan Prize worth £250,000, and finally, last but not least, the Nobel Peace Prize awarded in 1979 with a then check of $190,000. D. What did Mother T say when Union Carbide, after years of negligence, spilled chemicals over the Indian town of Bhopal, killing over 3,500 and injuring perhaps 500,000? Forgive, forgive. The same standard apply, incidentally, that she said when asked about Hitchens' documentary of her, Hell's Angel, She forgave him. So what shall we make of the missionary position? While Hitchens with his book got the ball rolling on exposing the real Mother Teresa, this really only deserves a B, given that as a polemical expose of less than 100 pages, it's long on the polemics and short on the expose. A much better, more substantive work, published in 2003, after 8 years of research, was Dr. Arup Chatterjee's Mother Teresa, The Final Verdict. Let's conclude with some highlights of Chatterjee's book and then deliver a final verdict on Mother Teresa herself. A. The image in the West is of Mother Teresa speeding around Calcutta using her Sisters of Charity ambulances to pick up tens of thousands of those dying in the streets and gutters every year. At times, she claimed 27 or 36,000 annual pickups. The cold, hard truth? Contrary to her claim that we never refuse a child, her ambulances are hardly ever used to pick up people, mainly being used to chauffeur her nuns on unrelated business like shopping and commuter trips. There are hundreds of documented instances of Mother T and her sisters point-blank refusing to pick up children or people needing medical care or helping them in any way. Chatterjee himself documented this repeatedly by calling the Sisters of Charity and asking them for ambulances and being denied. He giving transcriptions of those conversations. B. Because of Mother T, Calcutta has received a horrible international reputation. But the reality is considerably different in that it's a normal Indian city. Not as, when one reads accounts of Calcutta of the early 1960s in Mother Teresa's biographies, the impression was that the city was one big necropolis with streets lined with dead and dying people. In fact, because of her, Calcutta got such a bad reputation that cabbies would ask arriving Westerners which of the slums they wanted to visit. C. Although Mother Teresa's 400 hostels around the world gave hardly any medical care to the dying, she herself on numerous instances availed herself of the highest quality Western medical care, having had numerous inpatient medical treatments in some of the most expensive clinics around the world. These include the Scripps Clinic in La Jolla, California, the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, Calcutta's Woodlands and Bellevue clinics, and received on numerous occasions sophisticated and expensive cardiac treatments at Calcutta's Birla Heart Institute. When she died, she was surrounded in her bedroom by sophisticated and expensive cardiac equipment which had been specially fitted for her. T. Mother T claimed in many instances, depending on her storytelling and her need to impress her audience, that she fed 4,000 or 7,000 poor Calcuttans a day. The reality? 200 to 300. Likewise, her sisters taught perhaps 100 children per day, not thousands. E. In order for a child to be admitted to one of her clinics, the mother or parents had to sign the child away, giving up their guardianship. A brutally inhumane policy. In conclusion, what Mother T mainly was a money-making machine, primarily for the Catholic Church, in raking in hundreds of millions of dollars and allowing those millions to be squirreled away in Vatican bank accounts. How much good did those hundreds of millions do? Very little. Yes, she founded her Sisters and Brothers of Charity and did have a few caring hospitals for lepers, but we've seen overall how harmful these now 14,000 sisters and their clinics are, mistreating people or allowing them to die. Compared to many other, more productive charities that exist in India, which Chatterjee describes, the money given to Mother T was a net loss, and any good nurse, radiologist, or doctor has done more in their career than Mother T ever did in hers, with her love of suffering and dislike of human well-being and happiness. Happy for my part that Arup Chatterjee, who has written an even newer book in 2016 called Mother Teresa, The Untold Story, and Christopher Hitchens have shown the world the true nature of and self-deception surrounding Mother Teresa. I bid you well, and remain the Scarlet Pimpernel.